What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden, and you may have noticed that I am in a different setting than I usually am. That's because my kids are little chaos agents and make more noise than they should be able to be capable of. But yeah, if you have a kid that's just over 1 year old, you realize that you can't get anything done because they're always climbing all over you and making tons of noise, and it's been impossible for me to film lately. So I'm filming at work in between patients right now. This will be my final YouTube episode. I'm going to be done with YouTube because I keep getting strikes. They keep taking my content down. I should be at over 10,000 subs at this point, but I haven't been uploading much there because they keep destroying my channel and banning me. And everything that they've banned me for has turned out to be right. I'm not getting banned because I'm misinforming people. I'm getting banned because I'm informing people on information that is counter to the official government and corporate sponsored narrative. That's why I'm leaving. I'm not going to go to Rockfin much more either. A couple of my old videos are unplayable on there, and I can't get anybody on the horn to fix them. And their interface on my phone for uploading is terrible. So Rumble it is. Season 5 will be exclusively on Rumble, so you can catch me there. It's going to be a while, I'm not going to lie. This is going to be like the break between Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. It's going to be a fucking while before I start uploading again. But I wanted to get this episode out because it's probably the most important episode that I have been thinking about the longest before uploading. I've tried 4 or 5 other times, and I just never quite get through it without missing a point or going down a rabbit hole and making the episode far too long. So I'm going to try to nail it here and get it up, and then I'm going to take a long break. But I think this episode is maybe one of the most important I've ever brought up because it's a thought experiment, and I think all American socialists need to run this thought experiment, not just in their heads, but just talk with other people about it, and particularly commentators who are putting their voices out there like me, who get lots of likes and views and are using social media to get the word out on trying to get this country on track. Because it's important that we stop fighting about which style of socialism is best. We need to toss away some of the old theory and understand that, the Maoists and the Stalinists and the Marxist-Leninists and the Trotskyites and all of these people, that's old theory, and a lot of it is applicable. But American communism in the 21st century is going to be far different than anything else that exists today or has ever existed. So we really need to have this discussion. What is American communism? What will it actually look like? And then we need to plan our attack over the next 5 to 10 years around what we think can be gettable. To do that, you need to be able to predict 2 things. You need to be able to predict, really you need to be able to predict one thing, and then you need to be able to analyze the culture. Like, you need to be able to analyze American culture, understand what Americans want, what they value, so you can sell a certain style of socialism to them and actually have them buy it in large numbers. You need to be able to predict where the U.S. sits geopolitically, and this is not where you hope for us to be, where in some utopia where we somehow join with other countries in to save humanity from climate change, or one of these rose-colored glasses futures that you see at the end of dystopia movies. It's not going to be like that. You have to give it an actual analysis, and you have to actually predict where the United States will be in the future geopolitically, what other countries think of us, what our trading style is going to be. Are we going to force people via sanction to do what we want? Are other countries like China going to become so powerful where they can sanction us into oblivion the way that we've been doing for the last half century? You have to be able to honestly evaluate these things, because if you can predict that accurately, then you can predict what kind of socialism is going to be popular and therefore populist in America. And I would recommend anybody in a Western country that is going down with the ship, like the UK, Australia, Canada, you guys really need to also run this thought experiment. Understand where your country is, how it is viewed by the rest of the world, and that will help you decide what kind of socialism you can sell to your people. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example, and I hope you guys can use this as a template, start having this conversation with each other, and really, really game this out in your mind the way that I have been doing for at least the last year. And I hope this will make sense. You can disagree with me on this, but if you disagree with my rationale and my analysis, you better have a good fucking reason, because I've thought this through a lot. Now, the two predictions I can pretty much guarantee you over the next 5 years that are going to happen, that will shape the next 15, 20 years, and therefore the entire future of certainly the millennials and Gen Z. Those two things are A, and this is irrefutable, if you don't think this is going to happen, you got your head up your ass, is the rise of BRICS and China as the new superpower. That is going to happen. I know you Americans, us Americans, like to think we're the best at everything, but all reasonable metrics nowadays show that China's economy works better than ours, it produces more than ours. They are a manufacturing hub of the planet. They essentially seized the means of production of the globe in China, and they went through an industrial revolution to get that industrial capacity, and they are the next superpower. It doesn't matter what we do, it's going to happen. They're ground and pounding us right now economically. There's nothing we can do to stop it. We might try to start World War III with them. I don't think that will even work, because the Chinese have been getting close with a lot of Middle East countries like the Saudis, and certainly Iran. They just brokered the deal between those two a year and a half ago or so. And so if they want to, they can get the Saudis to drop the petrodollar as the world reserve currency, or as the currency that is used to sell Saudi oil exclusively in, and that will drop the value of our currency. I've been talking about this for a year. They can get Iran to close down the Strait of Hormuz. Morocco could close down the Strait of Gibraltar. And the more friends they make in the Middle East, the more likely they are to collapse the petrodollar. They will prevent World War III this way, which, according to the leaked memo that one general or whatever released accidentally, or it got leaked about a year and a half ago, said that the U.S. is on schedule to try to start World War III with China in like 2026 or 2027 is what the memo said. If that's the case and the U.S. tries to force this on China, chances are they'll just pull our fucking card. They'll have the Saudis start selling oil in denominations other than the dollar. The value of our dollar will go down. World War III is avoided, but it collapses our currency, and gas prices, and indeed the prices of all consumer products, will go through the roof in the West, particularly in the United States. So that is what I think is going to happen. Now, as China rises, we have some choices to make as a country. And you tell me, of these three choices, which one are we most likely to do? A, we join China and we try to join BRICS, and we say, okay, you know what, you got us, you beat us economically, we're going to try to take a page out of your book, pick your brain on how you're doing so well with that market socialism you got over there, and that's how we get socialism in the U.S. I think there's a zero chance that that's going to happen. American people don't want it. 50 years of propaganda has us hating the Russians and the Chinese for no reason, and you're not going to unbrainwash 330 million people that quickly. The politicians certainly aren't going to do it either. So that's 0% chance. Second chance is that we actually do start World War III, and if we can't start it, we actually start nuking people and bring on nuclear holocaust. That's more likely than that first option, but I still think that, I don't think that that's going to happen. If it does, this video is not going to be accurate, and we're all fucked. We're all fucking dead. Now, the third option, which I think is the most likely, is that what happens is that Americans decide that we can take care of ourselves. Eventually, as China rises, they're going to be able to restrict exporting to the West, and in particular the U.S. They're even going to get the ability to sanction us. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of our shit comes from China and Taiwan, and almost all of our shit is imported. And all of the people that export that stuff to us are becoming friends with China. So eventually the BRICS nations are going to be able to cut us off, and we don't make anything here. During the 90s, we exported all of our manufacturing thanks to the Clintons, basically, Bill Clinton, NAFTA, and it destroyed the country. And now we don't make anything. We're a service economy that relies heavily on dark finance to keep this house of cards going. Now, that is what I think is going to happen, is that the United States will then, after we've been ground and pounded for a couple more years, and as soon as our currency starts to get devalued, the wages in this country are going to be so low, and the standard of living of people is going to be so low that that is going to give us fertile soil for some sort of popular revolution here. And if that's the case, I suggest it is a workers' revolution that focuses heavily on starting to build things here, because we no longer can import anything. And I don't think we have much of a choice. I think we're going to be put in this situation by China and the rest of the world, and by ourselves refusing to join the rest of the world at the big boy table. So what that means is that we're going to have an industrial revolution similar to what Russia went through in the teens and China went through in 1949 for a couple of decades, where we have to build out our infrastructure so that we can manufacture everything in-house. Now, remember I told you we have to meet Americans where they are in this situation. I think it's very easy to sell to Americans who are very indoctrinated and, China-phobic, that we sell to them this idea. Oh, so if China's not going to let us import their stuff anymore, we don't need them. We can manufacture our stuff right here using American workers and giving them good wages, and we can make better cars and better electronics than they can. Now, nowadays, we don't make anything well. Our cars are pieces of shit compared to the Japanese and the Chinese cars. Everything we make here is a piece of shit because we're a capitalist hellhole. So I think it is sellable to the Americans, to people like me, that if you want to compete with China, you have to start making things yourself. We have to start building things that we normally get from other countries here, and then a workers' revolution should be built around that. Now, this can be done. It's a little bit scary because I worry in this day and age that a lot of the capitalists in America will just decide to manufacture all this stuff using like robots, automation, stuff like that. That's the bad pathway that we might end up if we don't band together and insist that manual labor provided by humans be the linchpin that holds the revolution together over the next 20, 30, 40 years. Now, remember, I told you there's a second thing that I can pretty much guarantee you guys is going to happen over the next couple of years, and this is what's going to make everything fall into place, and it sounds like a bad thing, but it's really not. The boom-bust cycle that the capitalist system we have always undergoes every 4 to 7 years. There's always a bubble collapsing, and then we go into a recession or depression. Now, the last one we had was popped by COVID back in 2020, which means that almost guaranteed, over the next 4 years, maybe a little bit longer, but I don't think so, in the next 4 years, during the next presidential tenure, it's going to collapse again. And if you ask experts, they think it's probably going to be the commercial real estate bubble that pops everything else, and then they call it the everything bubble, where like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 bubbles all go at once, because there's a credit card bubble, there's a student loan bubble. And I don't think the people that are the real world movers in America right now are doing anything to help this. If anything, I think they're trying to get as much money siphoned out of the taxpayers' pockets into the military-industrial complex as possible before the currency collapses and before this next collapse comes, because they know that the printing of trillions of dollars and quantitative easing isn't going to be enough this time. Last time, Trump printed $4 trillion in a week to keep the stock market from collapsing and keep our country from going into chaos. That won't work again. There's too much inflation. We have too much debt. It's not going to work again. So the two things I can guarantee you that are going to happen, and these have to be the things that, for me, shape the revolution and the type of socialism we can actually get here in America in our lifetimes, is China and BRICS are going to rise and we are going to fall. It's just a matter of how far we fall, and how far we fall is dictated by how much socialism we are willing to undergo as we collapse. Number 2 is there's going to be another bust, and it's going to be before 2028. I would almost guarantee it. If you don't agree with those two things, then you're not going to agree with the style of socialism that I think is going to be possible here. So, if those two things happen, it looks like the United States will then become very, very insular. I don't think we're going to join the rest of the world. I think we are bombastic and a leap before we look kind of people. We're kind of dopey. We're uneducated. We're arrogant. Now, there are some great things about Americans. They're loyal. They love other Americans. They want to take care of this country. In fact, they want to take care of this country so much that a lot of times they don't even give a shit if we have to exploit other countries. That's Americanism for you, and that's an honest assessment. But there are some good qualities in there that can be used to usher in socialism as we start to collapse. And one of those is the fact that Americans like to have money, and they want other Americans to have money, and they don't want the oligarchs to turn this into some sort of dystopian police state. They want to be free, and they want to be free so badly that a lot of them have collected a whole bunch of guns so that they can protect themselves from a dystopia inflicted upon us by corporate oligarchs and the police state. We have a ton of guns. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing, because the proletariat without those guns, then you're like Canada, and those people are in some real trouble. I mean, right now they have a couple of things better than us, but I think the future is actually bleaker in Canada, because when the drones and the police state that has like robot dogs and stuff starts to arrest Canadians, they're going to have to fight them off with hockey sticks, and we're going to be able to fight ours off with guns. So I actually think there is a sort of rebellious nature that is built into Americans that is going to be useful and exploitable over the next couple of years. Now, as we become more insular, then socialism has to be Americans deserve health care. Americans deserve good, high-paying jobs. Americans can make everything in-house. We can manufacture everything that we want right here. Now, there is a huge problem with that. It's going to be a very xenophobic, almost nationalist style socialism, which I do not prefer. And in fact, this whole thought experiment is not the socialism I want. It's the socialism I think is possible. So that's the trade-off here. There are going to be some big losses that we take if this kind of socialism actually gets ushered in. So if you sell all of these things that we're going to need to compete with China to Americans, it behoves you to say, well, we can't compete with them unless we make everything in-house. We can't compete with them unless we have an educated population, so education is going to be a priority. We can't compete with them unless we have a healthy, well-motivated workforce, which means that healthcare is on the board, because you need a healthy, educated workforce if you're going to compete against China, which has a very healthy, very well-educated, very big, very disciplined workforce. So those are going to be things that you can sell to Americans as we fall. Okay? Now, there's some big losses that we're going to take too. Here are the two big losses that we're going to take. I do think that it is populist to think that Americans may shut down our borders. We're going to become more nationalist. I do think that there's probably going to be a loss taken at the border. I think that there will be very few foreigners allowed in the country, and that's not because I want it. I just see that being where we go. The more China and the West, or the East ground and pounds the West, is particularly us economically, I see less and less people being inviting of all these other countries that for years, decades really, propaganda has convinced us are out to get us. Americans are afraid of the Chinese, taking over us in economics. They're afraid of people from Mexico coming up and stealing our jobs. That's just propaganda, but I mean, it's landed well, and that's how Americans think. So I think that probably the border will either be closed or it'll be shut down much more than it actually is. That's one loss we're definitely going to take. And the other huge loss that we're going to take, and this is all for triage purposes, guys. That doesn't mean we stop fighting the good fight for the border and for, the second thing. The second big thing we're going to lose on is climate change. Because if it turns out that we need to bolster our currency, the petrodollar, with more oil because the Saudis start selling it in other denominations, it means that we're going to have to drill more for ourselves. And even Trump said, and I assume Trump's going to win this next election. I think there's 80% chance he's going to win. Chances are that we are going to start drilling more, and I don't think it matters how much pressure we put on our politicians. I don't think we're going towards green energy in the near future. It'll be decades. Now, again, we should just try to get those things implemented, but I think the future of America in the energy sector is going to be more drilling, nuclear power, stuff like that, which means we're going to take a loss on renewable energy. I'm willing to take those two losses if we can do what I think we should do, which is focus on worker-centered politics. And that means as we have to reindustrialize this country to make everything in-house to try to beat China, right? Because Americans want to beat China. If we manufacture everything in-house, it means we have to create a whole bunch of good jobs to manufacture all those things, and none of those jobs exist here anymore. Only 7% of our jobs in this country are manufacturing nowadays. We need to bolster that to 30, 40, 50%, and we need to make sure that they are high-paying union jobs minimum. Eventually, we can evolve to worker co-ops, but unionization, high unionization, is going to be key. And I think that one of the other things that we might be able to get, because it's in the interest of competing with China, is we have to get free college and clear out all student debt. I think those things are gettable. I think free childcare, universal childcare is gettable, because that frees up workers to work more, and they can have kids and be happy and not have to worry about paying an arm and a leg to keep their kids watched while they go to their good jobs. I think those are all gettable. And I think that possibly a UBI is gettable, because I worry about automation coming in the future. And I do think a lot of our jobs are like service jobs are going to go the way of the dodo. Whether we go through the revolution or not, they're probably going to be replaced by automation, which means a UBI has to be supplemented. Otherwise, you're talking about tens, if not hundreds of millions of people out of work. So we have to focus on those things. And if we were to get the things that I'm talking about right now over the next 10 to 20 years, it's not perfect. But Americans would be taken care of. Our manufacturing threshold would go way up, and our capabilities in terms of competing with other countries and what we can offer exportation of is going to go through the roof. So I think that that is probably the best way forward, but it has to be framed through the lens of our country's collapsing. We need to take care of our own. Oh, the other thing is, by the way, this is a no-brainer for Americans as well. It also means we stop all foreign wars and proxy wars, because you can always say, like, the true leftist position on this is wars are bad, they're inhumane, they're immoral, we shouldn't do them. But if you do that, you scream that in people's faces in America, they call you a hippie. What you can do instead is say, no, our sons and daughters are being sent overseas to die for oil so that corporations can make a bunch of money off of resources like opium and oil. And no more dead soldiers. They can be brought home. They can defend our borders. We can cut the military budget, and all imperialistic activity is ceased in this revolution. That's an easy sell to Americans, and probably the biggest selling point for me for this style socialism is that imperialism doesn't help Americans. American imperialism only costs Americans money, and more importantly, it costs Americans lives and human lives across the globe. And once we do that, we're starting to make less enemies, we're starting to make more trading partners, we're starting to build more bridges instead of burning them, and then Bob's your uncle, maybe 20, 30, 40 years, will be invited to sit at the big boy table with all the other mildly socialist countries who actually take care of their own. So that is what I propose we do, and I think you guys should go through this and really try to figure out what American socialism will look like, Americommunism, and do an honest analysis of what you think we can actually sell to our own people and what we can't. So, synopsis, you guys. China is going to rise, BRICS is going to rise, that's an inevitability. We're going to see a big bust in the next 2 to 5 years, and that is going to be fertile ground for some sort of revolution. I propose it's a worker-centered revolution that focuses on taking care of our own here and producing everything that we need here. We're going to take some big losses on climate change. We're going to take some big losses at the border, but I'm willing to trade those and move those farther down my triage list if we can get some of the things that I'm talking about, which is healthcare, universal childcare, high unionization, and if we can reduce the foreign wars. That's what I think we should aim for, and that's what I think is possible. And if you guys want to keep screaming into the void about all this utopia shit that is never going to happen, that's fine. Just expect that the millennials and Gen Z are just going to be absolutely fucked. I mean, it's going to be third world country shit, and there's nothing we can do about it if everybody just keeps yelling at each other on the left and there isn't some cohesion and we don't come up with some sort of game plan. Make some predictions on where we're going to be. Be honest with yourselves. Americans have to understand how they're seen by the rest of the world and understand that we are not at all exceptional. If anything, the last 30 years has proven that we are actually less exceptional than very many other countries, especially the East. And we should be taking a page out of their book to try to figure out what to do, but we're not going to do that. We're an arrogant bunch. We can create our own socialism that isn't anything like the Chinese market socialism. They call their socialism with Chinese characteristics. Let's create an American, or a socialism with American characteristics. And I think what that means is end the foreign wars, bring everybody home, protect our troops by not sending them to die for opium and oil. Let's educate everybody. Highly educated workforce is the only way we're going to be able to compete. We got to get our manufacturing capabilities back, and that requires an industrial revolution that's going to be very, very much, it's going to pollute a lot of shit. It's a sacrifice we may have to make because we need to be able to make all this stuff in-house, because as soon as the East rises and Americans and our politicians won't work with the rest of the world, it's just going to become a third world country here unless we start figuring out how to make things that we can afford here in our own country. Okay? High unionization, and we can get health care. And I think we can get some other things like via executive order, like we can definitely legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana. We can build out our infrastructure to bring it into the 21st century, because all of our trains are derailing, our buses are 50 years old. I mean, all this stuff, our roads are covered in potholes. We can come into the 21st century on infrastructure as well. So let me know in the comments what you think. Game this out yourself. You can disagree with me, but if you have a disagreement with me on what I just said, you have to have a good reason. And I don't want to see any pie in the sky bullshit about how we're gonna get this utopian style socialism in America. I'm not gonna live maybe more than 30 or 40 more years. I want to see some of this shit now, and this is what I think is possible. And it has to be framed through the lens of Americans taking care of their own. We have to take care of our own, because Americans inherently, culturally, love each other, and they do care about taking care of our own, and they do care about competing in the world. Americans love to come in first, don't they? They love to compete. They love to get the gold medal. They're so proud at the Olympics, aren't they? But you have to then sell that. You have to use that competitive nature that comes standard in American psychology and say, okay, you want to win? We got to introduce some socialism, otherwise we're just going to get pounded into the ground by the East. So let me know in the comments what you think. I'll probably come back in a couple of months, but it's going to be a big hiatus here, guys. I don't have the time. Quite frankly, with everything that's going on in Gaza, and seeing dead kids every 2 seconds for the last 7 months has really taken the wind out of my sails. But I will be back exclusively on Rumble. Last thing here, I've been banned off Twitter. That's another thing. I've been banned off of Twitter for an awesome, super viral tweet that I had, basically making fun of all of the Israelis being ultra victims. And it's under appeal right now, but it's been 5 days. I think they've locked me out of my Twitter account for a while, if not permanently. So that's another reason I'm taking a break. I can't communicate with anybody anymore. They crippled my YouTube. They crippled my Twitter. And it has nothing to do with me lying about anything. It has everything to do with me being right about so many things. And I think I'm also right with what I just portrayed to you guys, conveyed to you guys in this episode. So please do this same thought process, thought experiment. Think through it, really game through it for months if you have to. Write some shit down. What is American communism, and what can be sold to Americans, and why? Keep fighting that good fight out there, guys. I'll talk to you later.